Thanks so much for joining. I'm Travis Sturek, product manager here at Peplink, and I'm so happy we've got Peter West, Professor P, with us today to talk to us about firmware 8.3 in our Peplink University series. So, Peter, welcome. Hey.
Well, thank you for having me for this next season. I love this back and forth, and I think this is going to be a fun one because it's not just going to be as much of a demo as much as you and I talking about all these new features coming in 8.3, and I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I love it every time. Maybe not every time, but a lot of the times we come out with firmware, and this is 8.3, and when I start looking at all the features, it's like this doesn't deserve a 0.3, a point firmware release status.
I really don't. I was excited about firmware 9. And when 8.3 came out, I thought this was going to be firmware 9. I honestly did. I was like, there's so many improvements coming in this firmware that I'm like, I'm like blown away by what might come in the next major release,
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the fun part about what we get to do, is we get to show people all this great stuff. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to dive in and show you all this powerful functionality, and I think there's a lot for a lot of people that a lot of people will enjoy here, especially 5G Starlink customers. There's lots to show.
There's a lot. And I'm running in my Sprinter, and I installed my Starlink on it. Now I am facing a building, so I'm getting obstructions, but I do have my Starlink set up, so it'll be fun to showcase that today as well. And then the other thing is, instead of just a feature, Travis, I want to do this a little different. I want to talk about these features and explain why we have these features and what the difference is between like vWAN and synergy mode and some of these amazing new technologies that are coming out and why you might use them. And so I've got two different routers set up. I've got my router in my Sprinter, and then I've got my router in my lab, and we're going to use both of those. And then I've got Vizio, where we're going to showcase some topology answering questions. And so hopefully this is going to be educational about these new features, but also showing you how to implement these new features as well.
Yeah, and I love that. The Vizio, that's classroom again, right? Like let's connect the dots and show how this actually works and what you can do with it and why you're going to do that. So absolutely. Wow.
Excellent. So let's dig in. 8.3 is currently an RC3 right now. It's in the it's release candidate. I believe there's going to be an RC4, if I'm allowed to say that out loud, which I just did, so it doesn't matter. And then we're going to try to go to GA. So so this is a beta. So I don't recommend using this in a mission critical business environment, but if you're the kind of person that likes to play and wants to play around with that software, that's great. But otherwise, think of this as just getting you excited about what's coming, more so than go out and download this today. If that makes sense.
Yep. And I'm that type of person, and I know where that risk and line is. And I'm running that firmware now on this webinar, right? I mean, this is our dog food, so we eat it, and I'm not saying, again, like you said, go put this in your production environment, because that's your decision, not mine. But yeah, I got to make sure it works before somebody else finds out if it doesn't. So
exactly. One of the things that I forgot to put in the slides, Travis, and I do want to highlight before we go into the slides, is if you are familiar with the balance and the max interfaces, the GUIs, you're going to notice something up here in the top. So this is a Peplink balance router. Dashboard, SFC, network advanced, AP system status. And then if I go into my max router, dashboard, they have now unified the language of network and advanced. I forgot to put that in the slides, and I was noticing that while I was playing around with my lab today. And I just wanted to highlight it real fast that they've unified the UI. Additionally, if you've ever used a max router and you have these drag and drop priorities, well, now in the balance routers, you have that functionality now. So this is the balance. This is an EPX. And I now have the ability to drag and drop my priorities now. And once again, I do apologize. I forgot to put those in the slide, and I just wanted to quickly highlight that before we get started. They've unified interface, and I'm very pleased about that. Now it's even more uniform, right? Between the ecosystem is now more merged between the Max and the Balance series.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up, because that really tells a story about everything about where we are now, because that's how Peplink started, right? We started out with wireline, and we were doing bonding 10-15 years ago with wireline circuits, and that was cool and that was relevant in the wireline world. But then cellular became a thing, and so that was the PepWave brand. So Peplink was the wired and PepWave was the wireless. And with 5G and Starlink, and that differentiation is just not relevant anymore, right? Businesses use it all, and so everybody uses it all. It's not just businesses either, right? And so that's not useful in the product interface either, right? There's no reason to differentiate those two. And so we're very much trying to undo those things, and because they're doing the same things, right? They might have different ports or different interfaces, but we're solving connectivity problems and we're making that work better. And that's the message now. And so we're trying to deliver that in a unified way in the GUI as well. And so that's kind of the backstory on why that all changed and why that was the way it was. But very much happy to see that unified, like you said, Peter.
Yeah, it's very nice. So let's talk about some technical improvements as well now coming in. So so in the 5G world, Peplink's added a 2 antenna mode. This is really important for those that might be interested in going from an HD4 MBX Cat 12 to an HD4 MBX 5G and not wanting to install 2 new antennas. So 5G or Cat 18, starting with Cat 18, Peplink went to 4x4 MIMO, which means there's 4 antenna connections per cellular modem. So if you have an HD4 MBX Cat 18, you have 16 antenna cables on the back of that beast. And then if you have an MBX LTE-A Cat 12, it's got 8 antenna connections. And then the category 20 or the 5G is running 16. It's 4x4 MIMO. So Peplink has made the ability now where if you go into the 5G modem, you can now choose either 2 antenna mode or 4 antenna mode, and that'll allow you to use your existing mobility antennas to take advantage of 5G. Now you will lose 2 of your antennas, so you lose a little bit of performance and or signal capabilities or band capabilities, but you're not going to be just sending data out to antennas that are not connected. It'll actually turn those off.
Yeah, I think the upgrade thing that you mentioned is, I think, such a big deal. And whether you've got a Peplink router today or not, anybody that's looking to upgrade an existing cellular deployment to 5G, this often gets overlooked that, oh shoot, I need a whole new antenna now because I've only got 2 and I need 4. And it's not just a Peplink thing. 5G, the standard is to have 4 antennas, and there's technical reasons for it, but with 2 antenna mode, you don't have to now, right? And you're going to sacrifice a little bit of performance, but in most circumstances, it's going to far outweigh the benefits of your performance benefits are going to far outweigh that little knock on the 2 versus 4. So just opens it up to make it way easier to deploy 5G.
Exactly. The this feature, this 2 antenna mode is only available on the GH devices, correct? Am I saying that correctly, Travis?
Correct.
Okay. There are models of our routers. So like the GD, the Cat 18 is the GLTE. The original 5G was the GD, and then the newer and on a different chipset, they're GH, and those are the ones that are going to have this functionality, right? So the model does matter.
Yep. And so the 5GH is basically the default SKU for the US market, and there's right. Certification reasons more so than technical reasons why there's 2
okay. SKUs. There we go.
So yeah, but nonetheless, this is a technical difference between those 2 SKUs. That 5GH SKU has the 2 antenna mode, the 5GD would not.
And if you have been playing around with Peplink routers for a while, especially the 5G, you'll notice that the cellular settings on the 5G routers was horribly missing some of the features. You can now see that all of these features have been added back in. So we have our signal strength, our bandwidth allowance. We have the carrier selection capability now, where we can customize a PLM encode or manually select a carrier. So we now have the ability to have carrier selection as well as signal threshold. Let's see, signal threshold, monitor bandwidth, channel widths, and even SIM card priorities. And SIM card priorities is really cool. So if you look here up at the top, I've got SIM card, SIM A, SIM B, and then remote SIM. One of the biggest problems with the remote SIM or the SIM injector was, well, what if you're trying to connect and that SIM ejector isn't there? You can fail over to like a Pep SIM or a backup SIM card on your slots, and then prioritize your those different options. So I think that's a phenomenally powerful capability that's been added to the cellular settings routers.
Yep. I mean, more and more customers are using more SIMs, and so being able to manage those intelligently and automatically, so you don't get yourself in an overage situation or, you know, missing a carrier when you need the performance.
Exactly. Dynamic weighted bonding. There's an entire white paper on dynamic weighted bonding on the Peplink forum. And if you want to go into the technical details about this, I highly recommend, if you're one of these people that really wants to understand what Steve did in this, I highly advise reading that article. But for the purpose of this webinar, dynamic weighted bonding has been a dramatic change in cellular bonding performance or handling of what we might want to call like variant or very like differential internet connections, right? Where you have, you're not bonding two 5G or 5 gigabit fiber lines. You're bonding variable internet connections that might have some throughput, then go away, like cellular or satellite. And dynamic weighted bonding handles those variables much better by dynamically enabling WAN smoothing or based on packet loss, or handling packet loss as a means of congestion detection. And so that with 8.3 firmware, dynamic weighted bonding is now the default bonding profile for any new tunnels created. So prior to 8.3, when you created a new profile, you would get bonding as the option, and you'd actually have to manually go and enable dynamic weighted bonding. Now with 8.3 firmware, dynamic weighted bonding has been through the paces. It's been tested. We've been using this, I believe, since 8.2.0, and that might be wrong, but I believe that's accurate. And so it's been through the testing, and we believe that dynamic weighted bonding should be the default bonding policy at this point. Travis, any additional on that, or does that seem about right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the big story, again, it kind of comes back to that whole, you know, the GUI merging, right? The wired and the wireline worlds have merged, and the links and the connections in those two different worlds behave dramatically different. And so there's products out there in the SD-WAN and enterprise space that do bonding and some of those things, but they target the wireline only because that's the biggest business market, right? That they've all got the dedicated guaranteed circuits that behave very well day to day most of the time. And so nobody has these algorithms that are really optimized to put both of those things together, right? We've got these like cellular networks that are just ad hoc, right? We just don't know what we're going to get out of them any minute or second of the day. And putting that together with a very reliable link doesn't always work that well. And so dynamic weighted bonding deals with those variations and combines them in a much more intelligent way than we've ever been able to do before. And so, you know, the possibilities are growing and growing, and so we're making the algorithm more and more intelligent to deal with all those different options that are out there, so that you don't have to think about it and fine tune things. It's just going to work much better and protect what you care about protecting.
It's interesting because where I'm at right now, I actually pulled up to do a job, and there's a big building right that way. When I was driving up here and I pulled in to get some coffee earlier, I was doing some speed tests, and I was getting well over 100 megabits of bonded throughput on my Sprinter here. Mm-hmm. And when I got here, I'm only getting about 20 megs. But more importantly, what was really interesting about that, it's not the throughput, it's the fact that one of my carriers is only getting about 300 kilobits. Mm-hmm. Prior to dynamic weighted bonding, all of my connections would be getting under a meg. I'd only be getting 3 or 4 megs of throughput. Yeah. Because that 300 kilobits of capacity on the one carrier would throttle all the others in traditional bonding. But with dynamic weighted bonding, Peplink just says, okay, that one's 300 kilobits, but this one's 20 megabits. And so it lets me continue to utilize that 20 megabit circuit, even though one of my circuits is 300 kilobits. And so my bonding isn't damaged by underperforming circuits. And that's a big deal when you talk about cellular bandwidth and bonding and dealing with throttling issues or congestion issues. And that is single-handedly is one of the most powerful features of dynamic weighted bonding, is that ability to detect that and understand that, okay, I'm going to use that differently than a traditional bonding profile might use it.
Yeah. For people that are new to Peplink, all you need to know is you don't have to do anything, right? You just set up your connection and you've got dynamic weighted bonding turned on, and you can throw the links you've got at it for the most part. I mean, there's going to be some times where you need some, more refined strategies on that. But, if you're not new to Peplink, you don't have to do a lot of the things that you used to have to do to make these things work really well. You used to go in there and set like, okay, maximum latencies for each link. And, if this link gets this far away latency wise from that, you used to set a lot of different parameters to try and react to these things automatically in a good way. But now you just don't have to. It's incredible how simple it's gotten to deal with really one of the most complicated things we've ever seen, putting all these links together.
And the neat thing is it's all math. It would be so easy to say this is like AI, but it's mathematical equations that are analyzing this data in real time. And I think that's just so cool because it's an equation that's being monitored inside the SpeedFusion tunnel. So we think our VPN is just connecting us, but it's actually creating a lot of data insight that allows us to make these choices. And that's, to me, that's awesome.
Yep. SpeedFusion knows exactly who's performing and who's not every second, every millisecond. And it'll send as much mail as you can handle basically to each connection out there. And it does a really good job of basically finding where that breaking point is for each link and reacting to that as that changes too. Because that's the thing, is these links, the breaking point changes constantly, again, hence the dynamics. So the math has to keep changing too and respond. So
synergy mode. I don't know if any of you follow me on LinkedIn, but probably every other week I'm doing a deployment of an SDX with a number of HD1 domes. And those domes are WANs for me. And I use an SDX or an EPX to create those connections. And I'm managing tons of connections. And it's very complicated for the end user to see this. And synergy mode has got me ridiculously excited. And if you saw my EPX a few minutes ago when I was showing off the GUI unification, you got to see a little bit of synergy mode. Synergy mode takes the WANs of an upstream Peplink router and makes it the WAN of the synergy mode host. And it's like this magical, awesome mix of just cool technology. And so I kind of have a little Visio here. So I have an SDX now in my demo on In Control. I'm gonna have an EPX, but I thought the SDX Pro looked cool, so I have this one here. And then you have a Transit Duo with synergy mode enabled. And so the Transit Duo is going to plug the LAN of the synergy of the Transit Duo into a WAN enabled port on the EPX or SDX Pro. So you're going to enable WAN on this port, and then you're going to enable synergy mode on that WAN, and then you'll plug in your Transit Duo. And then the same thing will apply for like an HD1 dome. And the reason why I'm doing an HD1 dome and a Transit Duo is because it showcases two very unique scenarios. An HD1 dome will have just a 5G connection, or if you have the new HD1 Dome Pro, you might have a 5G and a Wi-Fi. But for me, it's just a 5G. The Transit Duo, oh, I'm sorry, this is actually 4G. I apologize. Made this really quick. The Transit Duo has two 4G modems, a wired WAN, and Wi-Fi WAN. And so an SDX has no wireless in it. It has no cellular in it unless you have the cellular module. So in this scenario, this EPX or SDX Pro is simply Ethernet ports. However, when I enable Synergy mode on this device, my Synergy mode connected devices, so my Transit Pro Duo, my HD1 Dome 5G, and my BR1 Mini, show up as like flex modules on my EPX. And you can see here's my Ethernet WAN, my 4x4 MIMO, this is the Transit Pro. So my Wi-Fi, well, they're labeled wrong, but my cellular, my Wi-Fi, and my Wi-Fi. Then the HD1 Dome has cellular. And then the BR1 Mini has Ethernet WAN, cellular WAN, Wi-Fi WAN on 2.4 gigahertz, and Wi-Fi WAN on 5 gigahertz. All of these WANs get added to my EPX as if they were physical WANs. You can see connected to T-Mobile, connected to AT&T. If I scroll down, here's my Ethernet Transit Pro WAN 1, my BR1 WAN 1, and then somewhere I have my cellular connections. And I apologize, there's so many. Here's all my Wi-Fi WANs that are all being brought in from these different devices. And so I can actually click on that and actually see if there's Wi-Fi networks available as if this EPX had those connections. And so it brings the management and support of these devices directly to the UI of the host. And then one last comment on it real fast. To enable this, you're going to go to the Network tab, WAN, and then I can scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you got Synergy Controller. If I click this edit box, I can tell it which Ethernet ports I want to turn Synergy mode on. Synergy mode will not work in combination with vWAN. So we're going to talk about vWAN in a minute, but it's important. This is basically creating a GRE tunnel between the host device and the synergied devices, using a GRE tunnel and then pulling those interfaces in. So you should not manage those devices via in control or via directly. So to turn this on, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your EPX and your SDX or your whatever it is that has Synergy mode, and you're going to enable Synergy mode on an Ethernet WAN. Then you're going to factory reset whatever device you have plugged into it. And then what's going to happen is when that thing boots up on the LAN, if it's running 8.3 firmware, it'll then detect that it's a Synergy mode port on the host and then turn into Synergy mode. So it's a factory default 8.3 peer device that is being synergized into the host. And so it's a little bit of a weirdity, but once you have it set up, it's really reliable and clean. And so I was able to do 2 of these devices remotely after I figured out how to make it work. The biggest mistake I made when I was trying to make it work was in control. I had all my synergized devices listed because it's in control, and so you want to manage all your devices. So what I did is I created a new group called synergized devices, put those here, and then turned on enabled under in control. You see configuration lock is enabled. So I have configuration lock. So in control is reporting these devices, but they're not being managed by in control. In control is not pushing any configurations to these devices. So the host device router is managing these devices. But this allows us to push firmware, check the health of the devices. I can see my cellular WANs that are connected to these devices. And so I created a different group called synergized devices, blocked configuration updates, factory reset them, plug them into the Ethernet port, and now I have that. And I wanted to show this because I think sometimes it's like, and I don't know, Travis, you get on these webinars and it's like, oh, we have this really cool feature. And it's like, okay, well, how did you make that work? Because so I wanted this to show you, it's complicated, but I really wanted to spend a few minutes showing you what I had to do to make it work.
Yeah, and how you actually put it into action, right? That part might change depending on who you are, right? If you're a managed service provider and you've got 50 customers and 1,000 locations, you're going to approach this very differently than you might if you're an RVer and you've got a BR1 Mini and now you upgraded to a BR1 Pro 5G. But nonetheless, this feature works great for both of you, right? And so there's ways to actually put that into play for each of those use cases, but it's a great feature for both of them too.
It is. Synergy mode is really neat. And so I kind of like outlined this, but I just wanted to highlight that capability and make sure. And this is my lab EPX. So you can see I've got my SIM injector module, and then I've got my devices. And so I believe this one is RSIM. Give me 1 second. I believe my Transit Pro is RSIM. There we go. So I enable right here. You have those the options here. I don't know if you want to talk about this at all, but that's pretty cool. RSIM is enabled. I got it as priority 1, and then I've got the serial number of my SIM injector and the EPX, and then I told it to use port 3 right there, and it simply sees it. I mean, this is actually the GUI of another router, but it's happening inside my EPX. I don't have to log into that router and make any configuration changes, set any IP addresses. All the IP addresses of the cellular interfaces are coming right to me. So if there's a public static IP assigned to these interfaces, they're coming right in. And so it's really convenient for management.
Yeah. There's been people putting Peplink products together for years, right? And it's great because, we've got a lot of different products to serve different use cases, but sometimes when you can put the Legos together, you can build some really cool stuff. And, it's not just because it's cool, right? It's because it's useful and it solves problems in ways better than other things are able to do. And so this just makes it so much easier to actually change the game and deploy things in that way. And so, just like you do with all these, mobile command vehicles, mobile broadcast vehicles, you're putting different things together that didn't start out as a total solution, but, with some ingenuity and now some help on the GUI, it is a total solution, and it makes sense from everybody's side then.
And the customer logging in and looking at it, now they see, oh, I've got 12 cellular modems. Like they don't care that it's an HD1 dome on the roof of the vehicle. They care that they can see that they're connected to AT&T and T-Mobile, and their signal strength. All those features come right into the single interface, the synergized interface in the EPX. And so it's very, very nice.
I think, you showed the in control screen, and I think, those of you out there that haven't really tried to do this before synergy mode don't really appreciate what that looked like. And so before, you'd have, like, let's say we have one bus, right? It's a mobile medical bus. It's a really important vehicle. And so Peter's got 8 domes, 8 5G connections on top of that. So it is fast as can be and reliable as can be always, right? Well, before, you would have in a group, you would have, okay, I've got my router that's inside the bus. Maybe I've got an SDX Pro, and then I've got these 8 domes. Those are all in this group. So every single device was in here, and it showed each of its individual connections there. And then you had to do some configuration, and it was just a mess, right? It worked great.
Well, and then you had to tag them. So, hey, this is in bus 1, this is in bus 2, this is in bus 3. And so it made it really complicated for customers to log in and actually see what was going on. And you can see this right here. Here's my vWAN HD1 dome. And that's how I used to do it. Here's the HD1 dome. Here's the IP address of it. And then a lot of times I'd say this is on Ethernet 1-7, on EPX 16. And so you're labeling these domes to match with the corresponding EPX or SDX Pro or whatever it is. And it got really challenging when you're running, 14 or 15 mobile units.
Yep.
So
we had to level up and make it easier for people, and it's fun to see how it worked out.
Synergy mode does that. It is crazy, but caveat, like, just from a technical side point, but the synergized device needs to have go into an in control group, or just go to the device and disable in control configuration, factory reset it, enable synergy mode on the WAN tab, and enable that Ethernet port. It does not work on vWAN capabilities. It's a physical Ethernet port to a physical synergized device. So just wanted to highlight those steps, just to make sure anybody wants to try this at home.
Yeah, and I just want to plug the upgrade path too there, because it's fun to be able to combine things and build cool things, but it's also fun when you're just an average person to save some money and get something out of the thing that is kind of maybe older and needing to be replaced, right? If you've got an old slow BR1 Mini or something like that, you can upgrade to the BR1 Pro 5G, and now you can synergize that old device, and now you've got two
Yeah.
modems, right? You're going to use your
Well,
5G
in my
modem.
EPX, I've got a BR1 Mini, 4G,
Yep.
Cat 4, whatever it is in there. It's so nice. Or you take a 20X and just synergize right into that. So
Yep. So yeah, it's fun because again, these features are powerful for enterprises and individuals at the same time, and it's cool to see that.
So 8.3 has a ton of functional improvements, and so we're going to start going through those a little bit just to highlight some really cool functionality. One, the max adapter. This has sort of been like this weird, almost like synergy mode. It's been this weird USB modem that didn't have its place, because when you plugged into a router, there were no configuration options for it. It was just sort of like connected, and you didn't really know why or how. So now if I go to my my MBX HD4 5G, I've got my Starlink, I've got my 4 cellular modems. And then if you look right here, instead of a USB icon, it's now converted to a cellular icon, and it gets treated just like a cellular modem. So when I click on it, I get all the cellular modem settings. So a max adapter, when you plug it into that USB port on your device, it is just becoming another cellular device, WAN. So whether you're taking an old 380 and adding a max adapter so you can have a 385G, or you're taking an HD4 MBX and adding 2 max adapters so you have an HD6, or a 20X and adding a max adapter for another 5G modem, the ability to just have that as treated as a cellular WAN is really important. And it's very powerful for, once again, configuration, simplicity, and having that unified infrastructure throughout the deployment. Virtual WAN, I did an entire webinar on virtual WAN already. We did this with the 20X. This is actually my last webinar, the very first webinar, the previous one in December. But I wanted to increase this conversation a little bit, and I wanted to whiteboard this in Visio, because virtual WAN is, I think, more powerful than people might understand. And I wanted to, if you don't mind, Travis, I'd like to spend a few minutes on it. I know we're at 12:40, so I'm going to be respectful of people's time. So I've got my little lab here, and I have an SDX Pro. This could be a 20X, this could be a 380, but I love the SDX Pro, so I'm going to have an SDX Pro here. Then I have a switch, and I have 2 domes. And so these 2 domes are going to give us our 5G cellular connectivity. And you might be in a building where your data center or your IDF or MDF is sitting really far away from you're anywhere near being outside. So I can run a fiber line, get a little connector from the fiber ports on these two devices, and then I can plug in these 2 domes to this switch, and all I have to do is trunk a VLAN. So I could create VLAN 1101 and 1102, and then trunk that down to my SDX Pro, and have these on the LAN or on the WAN. And there's two reasons for this. WAN, if I do WAN, this port becomes a WAN port. The router treats it like a WAN port, and it's looking for 1101 and 1102 on the WAN. This is actually really important. Let's say if we're doing HA, and I've got 2 of these routers paired together. And I've got 2 of these routers where maybe they're in HA, right? And they're talking to this router, to this upstream switch. In HA, WANs are treated differently than LANs. And so if this switch were to go down, it would treat it as the WAN failure. So in HA, if this were LANs and this was going down into a core switch stack, then, and these are LANs, it will, even if the core switch stack were to fail, the HA is going to use the LAN of this and not detect that failure of the downstream connection. And so there's reasons why they're there, and the reasons why Peplink has these configurations available. And so it's important, once again, I mentioned this in previous webinars, but it's important to draw and understand the impact of any design. What's important with vWAN is the capabilities of the deployment. So one, we can have vWAN as WAN, meaning I can create 3 VLANs, 1101, 1102, let's say 2 because I got 2 domes here. And then I can set this as a WAN port and then trunk that up. And I do that in my EPX. Let me show you that on my EPX. So on my EPX, where's that tab? Oh, there it is. So on my EPX, I have this dome, and you can see it's SFP13 vWAN 1101. And so what I have is a virtual interface. So here's my VLANs as WANs, and I've programmed it. I'll show you this programming here. I've programmed it on 1101 on a specific interface. You see, vWAN uplink to switch A, port 49. And I just labeled that so I know where it's going. But you can choose a physical interface. When you choose a physical interface, it converts that interface into a WAN port, and then we'll look on that WAN port for 1101, that WAN switch for 1101. If you think about like a 20X that has that one WAN port, you could have a 20X with a switch, like an 8-port switch, and have 8 WANs connected to, well, 5 because it can only have 5, but five WANs connected to that, and then that going down into the 20X. Or I can choose as LAN, which I did in my previous demo with the 20X. When I choose it as a LAN, it will actually allow me, let me turn this on real fast. Let me go to vWAN 13 here, and I'll show you what that looks like. So if I go and I enable and I say as a LAN, and I go say I'll say 1301, and I hit save and apply, I can then go to my port settings, just like I did in my 20X demo video, click on any LAN port, go to access, and look, there's my reserve VLAN 1301. My vWANs, the ones that are configured that WAN interface, aren't there. Those are going at a WAN interface that are different. So I can set this port to an access on this 1301 as a LAN, or I can simply push it to the LAN and then trunk that to a switch. And it could be any switch architecture. I mean, we love Peplink, but it could be any existing switch architecture. And it's simply going to look on that LAN for 1301 and then connect to wherever, ask for an IP address. So this allows you to scale your infrastructure dynamically, depending on if you're using an existing LAN infrastructure to reach a faraway place, a WAN port to extend the number of WAN ports. So you don't have to have a whole bunch of things plugged into this. I can extend that out here and have this as a WAN port. Now I have 8 more WAN ports on my router, and so, or in this case 16. But or I can use it like a 20X and convert my LAN ports to WANs. And so there's 3 different use cases of the vWAN feature based on your topology. And that might be too complicated, and I apologize if that was a lot. Travis, maybe you can.
No, I've got a lot of thoughts on that. I mean, I love the way you laid it out, because I think that speaks to there's 3 different whys here, right? And so if you go back to your drawing, it makes perfect sense to me. So we'll start out with I own the SDX and I control the Peplink switch here too, right? Let's just say that's the scenario. I'm coming in to do this install, and I'm installing all of this equipment. It's all mine, and this is great. The why here, I'm going to run this one cable from my SDX all the way. This could be up, 15 floors through a concrete building up to a rooftop, and I've got 2 domes up there, right? The why is because I don't want to run a whole bunch of cables up there. I want to run one cable. Or maybe there's one cable there already and they won't let me run any more cables, right?
Exactly, which is the commonplace, right?
Yep. The other why is, for the second one that you said, is maybe I don't control this switch, right? Maybe this is the enterprise IT department's switch and they control it. And they're not going to let me, the Peplink person, come in and say anything about that, but they'll add a VLAN for me, right? and they'll add this or that for me, right? They'll work with me, but they won't let me run it, right? And so that's a different why, right? The why is because I can't put that switch there. It's their switch, not something I can manage now. So it's a different situation, but you're able to leverage that existing infrastructure without having to run a Ethernet cable and a switch right next to the switch that's already there, right? The why is you're going to save the customer money actually, but not ruin your life in the process, right?
Right.
You know, and then I think the third one is just more that smaller user, right? Why they've got a 20X and they want to add Starlink to it, right? They've already got a home, you know, wireline connection. They want to add a 5G connection that comes with a, you know, the carrier supplies the modem with an Ethernet port, right? That's the why on my 20X. I want more connections. So yeah, I agree. I think those three, there's just lots of different reasons why you might use this feature that might seem like it's geared to somebody else, or maybe you don't see why it would be useful to you yet, but
it's super powerful. And I've used it more than I thought I would use it, even since it's been released in just the last few months. I've found myself deploying this feature a ton. And so
this one's a little more technical. I mean, it's hard to talk about this one without getting a little bit more technical, but I hope between the two of us, we've done a decent job of explaining why you might.
I do a full hands-on entire conversation about just this feature on a 20X. So if you want to learn more about this on a 20X, let me know, or go look at that video, and I will make a setup guide video separate that's just vWAN for enterprise out the LAN and the WAN, and demonstrate that via switches. My lab environment that I use, my Peplink University lab environment, I've got my WAN switches and they go into my EPX, and these WANs are really cool because they're WAN ports. So if I go in this WAN switch, I can see my HD1 dome connected right there. So there's my HD1 dome, and that's vWAN 1101. But over here, these are two Xboxes, and they're on my LAN. They're trunk all. The guys in the lab, and our lab is in our lobby, and they wanted to play with Xboxes, and they saw a switch port, and they just plugged into the switch port, and they're using my EPX as the host for that. And it's trunking because this, remember I said port 49. So I'm coming in on port 49 and I'm trunking. If you see this, VLAN 1101 all the way to 1107. And then port 51 is a 10 gigabit. That's only my untagged LAN and my network management. And so this 10 gigabit is LAN going down into my EPX. This 10 gigabit is WAN going down into my EPX, all on the same Peplink 48 port switch. This doesn't have to be a Peplink 48 port switch. It could be any VLAN managed switch. And that's important because we're not carrier specific there.
Yep. It doesn't look like they're aiming right now during business hours either. Those ports weren't showing any traffic. So
so that it's pretty cool to have that and to show it off. Want more? There's more. 8.3 is loaded with features. If you've been paying attention to any of my content over the last 3 months, I have been screaming about this new InTouch capability. And if you are running large infrastructure, small infrastructure, if you have IoT devices that have serial or HTTP or HTTPS interfaces or RDP or VNC, InTouch, it creates out-of-band connectivity using SpeedFusion Connect. And so what it does is it allows you to add LAN Connect devices to InControl. So you can remote control that you can log into the web GUI of a non-Peplink managed switch or IP camera. You can connect into a remote desktop environment for a server or a PC. You can do a VNC connection to a server or PC. And now with 8.3 firmware, Peplink has added the ability to do USB serial connections. So you could actually connect a USB to RS-232, plug it into any RS-232 device, and then actually remote control that device. So if you go to settings, InTouch, if you have, and I'm so sorry, buddy, I forgot to plug it in for this. I'm so sorry. If you have a USB to RS-232, it's going to show up right above this IP-based option. and you can plug that. You can then manage the RS-232 devices right there, and then you can then add and manage it, connect to those via InTouch, just like you would like this RDP session coming right into the network. And so with 8.3 firmware, we now have the ability to do our USB to RS-232 for any RS-232 applications. This eliminates the need for a lot of other applications, and it comes free right to any Peplink router with a USB port. Super powerful.
Yeah, I mean, InTouch, this is just building and expanding on this whole concept. There used to be an enterprise, there still is an enterprise, this concept of out of band management. And so big companies build networks right next to their networks so that they can get into their network if their network fails. And if it sounds redundant, it is. It's intentional, right? So it's a different path to get into troubleshoot your network if your main network goes down. And so that was the concept, and still done today in many cases. But with InTouch, you don't need to have a whole separate network. You can just have InTouch, and you can have In Control, and you can have that management plane because you already have a whole bunch of connections into your Peplink, right? You don't need another network because you've already got all these networks built into these boxes. And so now you're able to do that with serial devices too. So a lot of companies have, it's either you've got a bank of third-party network gear like switches and firewalls and stuff that you're managing over serial, or sometimes it's industrial or telemetry applications where you've got sensors and data collection device or control devices to turn things on and off, right? And so all of these are different ways that you might use a serial port, but nonetheless, if you have a 20X or a balanced 2500, you've got a USB port that you can plug in one of these adapters to and start managing serial devices now too. So again, kind of a long description, but it's just you're able to get so much more functionality out of that box that you bought 3 years ago, right?
Yep. Well, and most people buy Peplink for out of band, right? The whole idea is Peplink is a lot of people's backup. It has that 5G connectivity, bonded connectivity that allows them to have that extra reliability, those increased nines, as you like to put it, Travis. And so you're already paying for this extra connectivity. Now with USB to RS-232, you can just replace another piece of unnecessary hardware with the Peplink. Additionally, that's not here, but there's a StarTech, StarTech, 8-port industrial USB to RS-232. And you can plug that in and give yourself 8 or 16 RS-232s on a single USB port going into a Peplink router. It's very, very powerful.
So yeah, even if you are going to build an out-of-band management network, you can take a 20X and one of those 16-port adapters, and you can run 16 different network devices now, and with full SD-WAN failover and completely seamless. And
yeah, it's pretty cool. Some increased improvements that we've already talked about. This 5G-H or Cat20 devices, we now support the 2X antenna mode. Wi-Fi WAN now has IP forwarding option. So in the Wi-Fi WAN, instead of getting a NATed IP, you can now IP forward that IP right to your end devices. 5G or Cat20 devices, we have signal threshold settings. And if you notice, it says 5G, not 5G-H. This would be for all 5G routers. We now have signal threshold support. This has been a highly requested feature, actually. IPsec GCM mode, the new AES GCM mode has now been enabled in 8.3 firmware. The 20X Wi-Fi WAN is now included with Prime Care. So if your 20X is covered in Prime Care, Wi-Fi WAN is no longer a license upgrade, is now a included feature.
That's a long time request.
That is a long time request. It's very needed feature request, especially when you're talking about Prime Care and how it includes a lot of things like SpeedFusion Connect and all these different options, and now adding even more functionality and value to the Prime Care subscription. That's already an incredible price point at it current. And this is not a sales call, but just adding more value to that already existing awesomeness. DPI is now included in session logging. And so that's been a heavily requested enterprise feature to get that layer 7 capability built into the session logs. And now with GPS, we have an option to turn off GPS and GPS forwarding services. So for enterprise security requirements that you might not need to be allowed to have GPS capabilities, we can now turn that off on the cellular enabled routers. And so there's sort of a lot of things in one. And I don't know if there's any, I don't know how to demonstrate. I mean, I kind of showed off the signal thread. All this is just GUI. It's not like there's nothing fancy there. It's just another security option. But just increase more features that are available built in there. I want to segue at this real fast and show you. I can't see. Oh, there we go. So if you go to if you search Peplink open beta, I want to show you this real fast. You can get the open beta program. Once again, for as a network engineer, this is beta, so please understand that this is RC3. RC4 is coming out. That's not why I'm showing you this. I wanted to show you this because if you look at this release notes, if you go to open beta and you'll see this release notes in the PDF, I wanted to read this. It's incredibly powerful, and it shows you notes about which devices are supported, and more importantly, for devices that might not be supported in the future. And so it's important to understand where the life cycle of a lot of your hardware is. And so I really want to make sure that you understand that. And then next, all these features.
I wanted to take a note on the life cycle thing too, Peter, because
yeah, go ahead.
It's easy to, it's so often that I overlook kind of like how we behave, and then I don't realize how a lot of our competition behaves and just how different our standards are versus some of our competition standards. So when we talk about no longer supported, all we're saying is we probably won't make more firmware for it that has new features, right? So that's all we're saying. We're not saying it won't work within control anymore. It will still work within control. We're not saying it will stop working. We're not saying any of that, right? A lot of vendors will draw those lines, right? If they say it's not supported anymore, it doesn't connect to their cloud management anymore, literally. Like it's,
yeah,
right? So
that's true.
It's a very different standard that we hold ourselves to in terms of what the long-term support actually looks like. And so in these cases, if there's a really critical security vulnerability, and history has shown this before, we will go back and make firmware for these devices too. That get that security update.
We should state that because it says further major firmware is not supported on these. When 6.3.4 came out, there was a security release like way after 7.1 had already been released. Peplink went back and released a 6.3.5 that had that security patch in it. So even though it was a non-updated device, it's still got a security patch. And not saying that Peplink will do that for every router, no matter how long it goes, but it's important to understand that major firmware will not be released. So these devices will not get firmware 9. Is probably the most important thing to understand.
I feel like we're the most clear and the most accommodating, and we just frankly have the longest life cycle, especially in terms of like firmware that comes out after you bought it. Like I don't know who maintains that longer. And
that be exactly like on that. If you go to Peplink firmware download, literally every single Peplink firmware for every router is downloadable. No logins, no passwords, no serial numbers, no gating, no check for warranty status. It's right there. So you don't have to worry about not being able to get firmware on your routers. And I think that's really cool that Peplink does that. So on this release notes, it's going to give you new features, new improvements, which we talked a lot about, but there's more in here that we didn't talk about. Resolved issues. This is overlooked a lot. And if you're technical on this webinar, I highly advise that you skim through this, because you might have a bug that you were kind of like annoyed by or that didn't quite work right. These release notes tell you when we solve those problems. And so I just wanted to showcase that. And I love
that you pointed it out, Peter, because that's a great example of us listening to the customers, because we didn't do a good job of that before. All right. We'd come out with beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, beta 4, and I don't know what the difference is, right? It was
Yeah.
really hard to tell, frankly, because it was moving so fast and it just wasn't getting really communicated well. And now you're seeing that, right? People spoke up and they told us, and we get it, right? We do listen. I I just want to emphasize that we really do listen to customers and implement those things. Sometimes it's not as fast as people want, but there it is, right? We're tracking that and we're trying to make it as clear as possible what we're doing every step of the way. So as you're waging through that kind of beta tests, you've got more information at your fingertips, hopefully. I know there's always things that aren't quite documented when they come out on the first beta, but yeah, we're trying to make it as cohesive as possible for you folks.
Right. So this next feature, Travis, I'm hoping you can maybe answer, because I'm curious if Peplink fixed one of my pet peeves with SpeedFusion Connect Relay. So SpeedFusion Connect Relay was built as a way to basically take a mobile, like your mobile RV, and take advantage of your home internet when you don't have a static public IP, or even maybe you're natted behind another infrastructure. And so SpeedFusion Connect Relay was the idea of being able to bridge two private IP connected devices together using SpeedFusion Connect. This note that came in for this webinar says that we can access, is layer 3 now enabled on SpeedFusion Connect Relay?
I'm not sure that one's curious to me.
That's new for me. I don't know if that's new in RC3, because so I might have to do some testing, everybody. I do apologize for not being 100% clear on this. SpeedFusion Connect Relay, though, is a great way of connecting two Peplink routers that don't have public IP addresses. A VPN requires a public IP, or at least publicly accessible IP. And so SpeedFusion Connect Relay was a way of bridging that, but in the previous versions, it was internet only. It would just basically bounce out and go through. It looks like 8.3, they've added the ability to have layer 3 connectivity. And if they've done that, I'm going to be very happy. So I will test this, lab it, and I will release a follow-up to this. And I apologize for not being ready for this particular slide, but that's really cool.
Yeah, I definitely hope that's true, because that, I mean, the internet only use case was definitely useful for like content. You know, if you're out traveling and you're trying to watch your home Netflix subscription, you know,
exactly,
is the way to get back home, so that you're not in a data center or on a VPN, and you know, you're legitimately accessing the content you're supposed to, but with the protection of SpeedFusion. And that was one of the big reasons for using Relay to begin with. You know, firewalling and some of those things sometimes too. We saw people using it for unique things, but yeah, being able to talk inside to your network in similar to that InTouch, I think is, I hope that's, I need to dig into. This is the beta.
Yeah,
right?
I will lab this after this webinar, and I apologize for not being ready for it. SpeedFusion Connect Relay was sort of like a little pet peeve of mine, just because I'm a big network guy and I want to be able to do layer 3. And it based on this comment from Peplink marketing, it says access your I2 device behind it. So I will verify this, and then I will release a follow-up, and I apologize for that. SIM switching is another feature that's been added, been heavily requested in my industry, at least. And the idea is, from in control, you can now switch between A and B. So if I go to my in control and go to my SpeedFusion, my Sprinter, right from the in control GUI, you can see that I'm connected to T-Mobile 5G, and I have another SIM card. I can actually click this, and I'm not going to do it because I'm broadcasting live and don't want to be embarrassed if it goes bad, but you can click this switch to this card, and it will shut down that T-Mobile and switch to another SIM card, which should be Verizon, actually. And so super nice feature. And the way it does this, if you look in the back end, what it does is it's changing the priority. So what it does in the back end, if you were to look at it, if I go to my T-Mobile 3 right here, you'll see that SIM A is priority 1 and SIM B is priority 2. So basically what it does is it switches it so that SIM B is priority 1 and SIM A is priority 2. And so you can switch those dynamically now from in control just by changing those priorities.
That little detail is really important too. That's kind of like the don't hurt yourself kind of thing, right? Like, so if you tell it to switch and then it doesn't connect to anything,
yeah, Well, and that used to be the alternative, right? Sim B only. Oh, great. Now
Yeah.
Sim B doesn't connect and the router's offline. So this one, if I switch to Sim B and it doesn't connect, it'll at least fail back to Sim A, which I know is working. So it's a great
you're
way.
gonna be dark for a few minutes as you wait for that to play out, but you're gonna come back. At
Exactly.
least that modem will go dark. If it's just a one modem device, then you got to wait for it to come back. But yeah, anyway.
And I don't know about you, Travis, but another heavily requested feature is, how do I know how my network's performing? And so Peplink has added connection tests to in control. So if you're running 8.3 firmware, you can now go into in control, go to reports and connection test reports, or go to, give me 1 second, I do apologize, under the group level, network settings connection tests to configure it. So if you go to network settings connection tests, you can configure, see daily test of cellular 1, daily test of cellular 2, cellular 1 and cellular 2. So I could add, for example, daily test cell 3, cellular WAN, cellular 3, and then I can do a speed test. And then I can say, what do I consider a failure? I would say if it's under 5 megabits per second and the upload is lower than 2 megabits per second, consider that a failure. And test every day at 7:30 in the morning. Hit save. I have this daily test right here of, I spelled it wrong, but I apologize. I'm an engineer, not a, so sorry. Save. Okay, there you go. And then if I go to reports, connection test reports, I can see the status of those test reports at quantity, and what the device is. And then if I go into a device, so I go to my device dashboard, click on my SpeedFusion Sprinter, and go to reports, connection test reports. That's two different places, the device versus the group. If I go into the device, I can actually see those test results on a graph. And so if you're going, where's the graph? The graph is in the device level report. And I can see those cellular test reports right there. Super neat feature. Very, very impressed by it.
Yeah, and that's, again, the why part, right? So many times, customers, whether you're an individual or you're a business, right? You're buying often Peplink to back something up, right? You want that reliability. You want to be taken care of when the thing that you rely on doesn't work anymore. So when you've got an unpredictable link as your backup, time goes on, right? You don't know what's changed in the 12 months since you put that backup in. You installed it and it was fast and it was great and it worked, but it's a year later and there's a bunch more customers and maybe it's not fast anymore, right? I don't know. I haven't failed over, so I don't know if it's good or not, right? Like that's the oops thing that happens sometimes, is you spend all this money, invest all this time into putting a failover solution, and then it takes 2 years to actually need it, and then it doesn't work that well because everything changed in that 2 years. And so this makes sure that you're up to whatever your standards are every day, every hour, whatever your sensitivity is.
And it does consume your bandwidth, so just be aware that you are consuming bandwidth. And so that's, if you're paid by the gigabyte, that might cost money, and just take that into account.
Yep. But yeah, this is really to prevent that. I spent a whole bunch of money on failover, and then the failover thing is totally disappointing when I needed it. That's what we don't want to happen for any of us, and that's what that feature's there to really help prevent.
So we've talked about a lot of technologies, a lot of features: SpeedFusion Connect, SpeedFusion Connect Protect, RSIMs. Peplink has this new, which I kind of highlighted when I was talking about it, but like the SpeedFusion LTE or SpeedFusion 5G data. If you're managing your devices, you don't want to think about all that. And Peplink has created an app called SpeedFusion Connect. And it kind of bridges all this together, right? We've talked about SpeedFusion Connect LTE or SpeedFusion Connect Protect. And so SpeedFusion Connect, or SFC, brings all of this together to allow individuals to manage that infrastructure way easier from a simple app. And so the idea is, you have a BR1 Pro 5G, you can add it to your SpeedFusion Connect app. You will see that in control. It is visible in control as well. but it's going to be configured via this app. And so don't use both, use one or the other. But this will allow you to subscribe to LTE data. It will allow you to subscribe or refresh your SpeedFusion Connect Protect plan. It'll allow you to switch your own SIM cards or bring your own SIM cards. It'll allow you to set up all these outbound policies and traffic shaping. So for a consumer that's maybe looking for a simple way to do all the cool stuff that we just talked about, Peplink has made the SpeedFusion Connect app. And I've played with it a little bit. It's kind of neat. I focus more on enterprise, and so I'm hoping Travis will have a more of a consumer touch to that. But it just, for anybody watching this, if you're an enterprise user, don't go play with this. Use it at home, because it does affect in control. And so they're not unified.
That's gotten a lot better though, Peter. That
okay, good. Okay,
that was like beta trial stuff. So the in control, it really is. There's a story for both, right? There's a story for the enterprise side, and there's a story for the individual side. And I think the individual one makes the most sense to start with, because it really feeds the second one too. And again, we just spent over an hour talking about a lot of really cool stuff, but again, coming back to the why, if I'm just an individual, I want my Zoom and my Teams and my, my communication stuff to work well, right? And I just want my connectivity to stay up. And so that's what this SFC app does. It just gives you eyeballs on those few things, and it gives you control over those few things, right? Here's my router, what's connected, what's not, what's connected to it, right? Is it a phone? Is it a tablet? Who's on my router? And then what do I care about, right? What do I want to protect? I want to make sure that I'm protecting this and this and this. And that's what this app does. It just gives you those handful of things that you need, and you don't have to go in and set profiles and do all these things. You just tell it, I want Zoom to work better. And so it's much easier. But on the enterprise side, if you're a managed service provider, you might want to extend that level of control to your user base as well, right? And so you might want to have some sort of middle ground where you're actually administering some of the background items, but you're giving them visibility and control over what their experience is like day to day. And so that it makes sense to them too. And so I don't know that side of the story is 100% baked in the cake yet, but that's really the direction that we want to make.
That's the direction. Okay, I see. Yeah. So they are working on unifying those two aspects so that you have the back-end engineering with the end user control.
Yep. And so you could just be a pure end user, and maybe I've got 2 routers or 1 router, and great, this is going to work great for you. And you don't have to be on a cloud and log into a computer desktop, right? It's not, that's not how most of us are going to operate this or that in our house or RV, right? And so
I like it. I like that.
It's ready to go on that. And you can buy data on there too, right? You've got T-Mobile, you've got Verizon, great. Use them. You're going to get a great deal from them. That's awesome. But when you get into the sticks and you don't have coverage, or whatever reason you need another option, you can just push a few buttons on that app, and you can buy data right now over the air, push that SIM to your router. That's what the app does. And so it makes it much more controllable, much easier for that user to control their experience and buy that data when they need it, but not sign up for something they're not sure if they're going to use either too.
That makes sense. Well, I will download that again, and then I will create a follow-up video just on SpeedFusion Connect.
I think we need to do a webinar. I think that'll be a good webinar topic for us.
Yeah, it would be a good webinar. I think it would be a good webinar just to talk about that, and we can set up the app and reprogram my 5G router here, my RV to use all the different functionality, because I've been playing around with all these different connections, and I installed my Starlink on Friday, so I've got that new big Starlink dish on the top of it now, and so I've got my Starlink and my 5Gs and my Max adapter. So this whole thing's like a mobile Peplink bonding machine.
Demo kit and your house some days.
So we are over time, but we have a lot of questions. Do we want to try? Can we try to establish a few questions here? Can you see my screen if I show that?
I probably can't. I can't right now. I don't see anything except for the slide. But
will all models support to choose preferred carrier?
That's
also
4G
already. Yeah, 4G already lets you have the preferred carrier selection. So it should be yes. The answer should be yes.
Should be yes,
to-
but there might be one modem from one region from 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know, right? There's going to be
Yeah.
a detail in there that I don't know, but
But for this,
almost
I
always
know
yes.
that on my BR1 Pro 5G, on my EPX, which is 4G. So if we pull up the BR1 Pro 5G or BR1 Mini, I apologize. If I pull that up, I believe I get the same. That's running 8.3. It's a 4G modem. And if I pull that up, BR1, I apologize here, BR1 Mini.
The background on that one is it's a modem dependent feature. And so if the modem supports that feature, then we can implement it. And if it's a
Okay.
modem that we've supported over the years, we probably have. And that's why it wasn't there on the 5G modems, is the modem vendors literally didn't have those commands built in their firmware yet. The 5G has been so
okay.
complicated. And so then they got that firmware there. And then we actually implemented it in our firmware. And we have to make sure that we upgrade their modems to get that, I mean, so there's a lot of Tetris being played to get those little things that really matter a lot to people and seem so easy, but and there might be a modem, a 4G modem from 3 years ago that didn't support that. I don't know, right? But almost guaranteed if it's a 4G modem, it should be there. But
Casey asked a really good question about in control. Dynamic weighted bonding has actually been in control for a long time. It was said, is the default for dynamic weighted bonding true with in control 2 as well, and TCP ramp up? Those features actually are in control. If you click star, let me just, I don't know if it's going to let me click next because I don't have a router. Let me pull up my, I actually have a bonding demo, SpeedFusion overview. I was actually working on a dedicated video just for these features. So I've got my 2 sites. This is actually a different YouTube video, but I'm going to show it anyways. So if I go to configuration and in control, click edit. I've got my 2 sites. Click next, and you'll see you don't see dynamic weighted bonding. But if you click this checkbox, show advanced features, there's dynamic weighted bonding and in control right there. So if you need to enable dynamic weighted bonding and in control, you just got to click this show advanced features. And then TCP ramp up is a per device option. So it's going to be under link settings. So if I click advanced link settings, then I can click, sorry, this box is in my way. Then I can click the edit option right here. And TCP ramp up is going to embarrass me here. TCP ramp up will come right here. I do apologize. So TCP ramp up is not, it's in my other other environment that's not available publicly yet. So TCP ramp up will come to in control, but dynamic weighted bonding is in control already. And kind
of like the modem router firmware thing, right? That little
one, but they've got to build it out and then get it pushed out. So TCP ramp up is not enabled yet and in control, but dynamic weighted bonding is, at least in public versions of in control. TCP ramp up replacement. TCP ramp up isn't a replacement for WAN smoothing. It's a complement to dynamic weighted bonding, which in some scenarios can be a replacement for WAN smoothing. But WAN smoothing has a very unique purpose, and it's to handle jitter and latency. And so I don't want to just blanketly say it's a replacement. It's complementary to dynamic weighted bonding to merge the idea of saving bandwidth while increasing reliability, which is the whole purpose of WAN smoothing. WAN smoothing is going to take packets to make it the best it can.
Yep, it's a middle ground, and it's I think most specifically designed, like you said, to just get things downloading faster. But so it doesn't replace WAN smoothing, like you said, either. I mean, but it can get you closer to replacing WAN smoothing in a lot of cases too. I feel like it, for real-time media, the only way you can be as confident as possible is to use WAN smoothing, right? That's going to give you the ultimate reliability period for real-time applications. But dynamic weighted bonding with TCP ramp up is going to get you pretty close to that mark. So it's just a value decision on your part, is how much does that data cost and how much of this traffic am I actually duplicating versus doing the ramp up thing. So
somebody asked if these features will be available in a balance 20. These features will be available in balance 27 and 8, but not future major releases. So if you're running older balance 20s, those have already been depreciated to the 7.1.2, I believe, firmware. And the newer balance 20s, this hardware 7 and 8, will support 8.3 and these features, but not going to be beyond that. So I'd probably suggest looking at the balance 20Xs or some variant thereof as you move forward.
Yeah, and I know one of the hangups on the 20 to the 20X was there's just not one, there's only one WAN port, right? And so a lot of customers on the 20 just kind of felt islanded there. And now with virtual WAN, you can do that.
Somebody asked a really good question about warranty, and I don't know if we want to answer that or not publicly, but basically it says, do remote WAN devices, the Synergy devices, need a warranty? I'm going to say yes.
They need an active care plan.
Yeah, okay, they need an active care plan to be connected. So these devices are pushing out.
So yes, some form of.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, so it's part of prime care and or essential care. Can it use a LAN port like vWAN? Yes, you can use the LAN port. Actually, our last video covers that. So you can pull that up, the 20X video. I'm trying to networks, want to run Synergy mode. That one I'd have to run a network design on for a guy named asked about 20Xs in Synergy mode, or about two balance routers in Synergy mode. Synergy mode just brings the WANs over, so it's not going to be networks, it's only the WANs. So think about that device being almost a dead device. The LANs aren't going to function, or shouldn't function. Even if you plug into them, they do function. You shouldn't be using them that way. The WANs are being brought to that Synergy device. So Synergy mode takes the WANs of a synergized device and brings them to the host. So those synergized devices should not have anything connected into them.
I see a question about dynamic weighted bonding and adjusting to big changes in bandwidth on the link. That is absolutely exactly what dynamic weighted bonding is designed to deal with. And it wasn't a bug. It's just hard. It's just
exactly. Yeah, it's just handling TCP and congestion. Somebody asked a question about will all models support Synergy mode? Right here. So if you go to that data sheet, you can see the device supported of a feature right here in the data sheet. So you can see the balance routers, the Macs, the X series, and things like that. So that's right in the data sheet for those details. How are you going to top this in 9? There's a lot of cool enterprise stuff coming in 9. I can't say that for sure, but Peplink just keeps amazing me over and over and over again with what they do, and I think we're gonna like that. No, when I say
we're
don't,
always you tell us is my answer. You tell us how we're this 9, because we get more ideas from everybody else than our own, for sure.
If every new feature takes on a new device or new capability, like Peplink will add a new feature like the BR1, which then got paired with 580s to create an HD4 with a 580 and 4 BR1s, and then the HD4 was born. I mean, every time they create a new product or a new feature, it increases the capabilities of the users, and then we get more products. It just gets better and better. This actually is a common complaint or question, and I actually want to clarify it. Somebody asked, when you say dome, are you referring to an antenna? I am not referring to an antenna. I'm referring to the Peplink HD1 dome. So if you go to peplink.com, that's funny. So you have the HD1 dome. It's actually a router and antenna. It's like a BR1 with antennas and an IP67 chassis. Incredibly powerful. They have a 5G version and a 4G version. I use it for a huge amount of my mobile healthcare vehicles and command vehicles, whereas the antenna is the mobility. So when I say mobility 42G, or sometimes I'll just say 42G or a maritime 42G, those are the antennas that have the 4, cables dangling out from the bottom of them. This is just a Cat6 cable that goes from the dome to an SDX or an EPX or a PoE enabled port on a Peplink or anything really. And so that the dome is actually an antenna and modem all combined into one nice IP67 chassis.
Yeah, so like if you look at, Peter's got the SDX Pro, right? You can buy an Ethernet module for it. You can buy a flex module and slide those Ethernet cards in, and then you can get the mobility 42G and you screw those coax cables to those slots. And then you run your coax out to, however far away you need to do it, right? And then you've got signal loss over that cable, and that's all fine. That's how antennas work. Or you can do what Peter's showing here, and he's taking those domes, not the antenna only, but that product, the dome, and he's using it basically as a lossless antenna, right? He's taking the radio and the antenna and using an Ethernet cable instead of all those coax cables. And the Ethernet cable doesn't lose signal. So you've got the radio and the signal all outside in the best spot possible, and then it's much easier to run the wire. So yeah, Peter, when you say domes, that makes sense. I mean, I love hearing people ask those questions because, yeah, to me, it's the HT1 dome, but yeah, all antennas, a lot of antennas look like domes, and yeah, you can do it both ways, but there's reasons for either.
So another question about 5G modems and the certification. If you just Google Peplink Verizon certification, you get this. Peplink tries to release all this information. They tell you which devices. The most up-to-date information is, well, actually, this one is not up to date. That's a press release. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm just embarrassed. There's C-band. Peplink has, yeah, there we go. So we're now C-band certified, and you got the right here, the HD4MBX, the BR1 Pro, the BR2 Pro, the MBX Mini. But where I wanted to show you is this: learn more. Should go to the forum, and the forum's going to give you the active information about what's going on with our certification process. So if you just do a quick support for Verizon C-band or Verizon 5G certification, you can get this forum post, and then it's going to give you all the details about the status of our certification process. Somebody asked if the multi-port serial adapter for InTouch. The answer is yes. We use the StarTech. I personally use the StarTech 8-port really easily. The 4-port also works, and so does the 16.
Yeah. I think the release notes have an important detail though. You have to make sure you have the right chipset of device, because not.
Yeah, it's the StarTech. If it's StarTech Industrial RS232 USB. It's specifically this industrial one. It looks like. It's the StarTech Industrial RS232, not the other one. It is a specific chipset, and it is in the release notes.
FTDI, Frank, Tom, Denver, India. I don't know the phonetic alphabet that well, but FTDI is the chipset keyword you want to look for in those StarTech adapters. But most of them are. But
yeah, it's this industrial. The industrial one has that chipset. But yeah, check the chipset and check the release notes before you buy it. I've played with the 8-port and the 16-port, and they've worked really well. But I do know that these plastic ones, just check before you use them.
Yeah, and they're really inexpensive. I mean, for what you're able to do with it.
Yeah, it's not expensive at all. About WAN functionality, I've heard paid option. vWAN functionality is a paid upgrade. You get one free with Prime Care on some devices, but the vWAN functionality is a paid license upgrade, but it's a one-time. And then as far as there being a number, I don't know officially what the product SKUs are, but I've got 40 on my EPX, so I know that we can support a lot. I mean, so this is my EPX with 40 vWANs. So we can get a lot.
I think we can wrap up for today, unless you.
Yeah, we'll wrap up. There's a lot of questions. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me via LinkedIn. I'm very active there. Or reach out to sales at peplink.com or sales at westnetworks.com, and we'd be more than happy to help you out and answer questions. Or reach out to the forum community. Yeah, we've way extended time. I apologize. I can talk forever on Peplink. But yeah, if you reach out to us, we'd love to answer any additional questions you have and talk about 8.3 firmware.
Just love that so many people are still on here. So thank you all so much.
Yeah, staying 30 minutes late. Just for me to scroll through a whole bunch of questions. I love this community. I love you guys so much. It's all fun. And I am in my RV in Houston, Texas. And if you happen to be around Houston, Texas, I've got my marketing team made these shirts. Professor P. These are REI, really, really comfortable shirts. So even if you don't like the picture on it, super ridiculously comfortable. So if you happen to find me in my RV, you can bump into me and you get a free shirt. So, but other than that, have a great day and never stop playing. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks, folks. Bye.